Okay, I'm live.
You know, these guys started promoting the fact that they need very clearly different varieties.
I don't believe it. It's got another fucking address.
I've been working within 5 years.
Oh, fuck's
Actually. And now they started showing.
You haven't seen the emails? Okay. Hang on a second. I put them on the phone.
There is pretty no.
Yeah, the address has changed. I'm gonna.
The address is changed.
Yeah. And so when you are marketing by saying I'm used.
But don't worry, that.
And you expect to be fact. It's not. And now they started letting people know what the flower is, how it's made.
What? Ian at Salmon, yeah.
So much. I know. Just tell me that.
Give me. I need an email address for the Salmon.
Which email? Okay. Try that one you had on Ian and Salmon.
Ian.
Everything starts with that. Everything arrives there.
.com, yeah.
.com.
I'm used to that. Let me tell you.
No, sorry, it's .net. Just stay out of this. Just stay out of the Raptors thing, please.
Okay, he should have it now.
Once too often. Or I'm rescinding the Liverpool victory. Like,
Alexander,
okay.
the address has changed again. It's hugely annoying. I sent you an email with the latest address for the Salmon news. Yeah, I'm sorry. This is the problem. The Hangout address keeps freaking changing. We'll have to assume that the Hooper one is right, but I will double check that. Yeah. Yeah, which I've just emailed you. That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'll get that from the new email.
And logging yourself when you can. Sorry about that. Okay.
Copy me on the.
I'm gonna.
Copy me on the.
I'll just. I'm just gonna try emailing. It's usually annoying, isn't it?
I'm good. Yeah.
So Ian
Okay.
at Salmon
Nation.
dot net.
Oh,
Yes.
before you send it, put me, also put me on that, just.
Yeah. Which is your email address?
Young.
What?
Y-O-U-N-G.
Yeah.
There you got it.
Yeah.
Anything yet? You got it? Okay. I have to introduce
But I have no idea how to do a screen share.
Do you need to screen share?
I can try and look into it.
No, Ian said you can figure it out. You need to
Yeah.
do that.
Well, I'm
That's
going
very
to
good.
empty chairs.
Right. Oh, you mean you need to screen share?
I need to get him into the room, into the audio. Ian, can you hear me? Can you put your thumb up if you hear me?
Yeah, I can see you walking around.
Ian?
Yeah.
Vaughn is trying to speak to you.
Ian, can you hear me? On the computer? No, I'm counting. 1, 2,
Oh, I can
3.
hear him now. Yeah, I got him.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay, Ian, I hear you. Can you just give me a sound check of what count to 10 or something?
Yeah, how are you, Vaughn?
Hey, yeah, I'm good. We're seeing you. You're seeing you, and we're hearing you. This is great. We're happy.
And the one thing I wanted to quickly do now
Yeah.
is see if you can see my. Can you see that, the PowerPoint?
No, I can't see anything. One thing I noticed is, are we getting a real backlight with your the window behind? Is there any way you could just?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot better. That's good. I'm happy with that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's pretty good. We'll just try and improve the light here, but we're seeing you here.
Okay.
Now you wanted to show a screen, yeah? I've not done this before, so forgive me, but I'm not entirely sure how to do that.
Oh, okay. All right.
But we can work it out.
It should be an option. I'll just look at the. I'll try and figure it out. Give me 1 second here. Here we go. Screen share on Google Hangouts. Inside the Hangout, click the screen share button on the menu bar. All right. So there's theoretically a menu bar here.
Oh, right. Yeah, there's a screen share menu. I can share my screen here. You must have the same sort of thing. I've got something here that looks like it's a green icon with a big right-hand white arrow that enables me to share my screen. And if I was to do that, it would look like this. Can you see anything?
I see you've got a whole bunch more.
Yeah. I'm sharing a screen now, and are you seeing it, interestingly, or not?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to stop doing that, but that's what I'm generating. I'm not sure that I can take one from you.
Hang on. Now it says that I am screen sharing.
Oh, sharing screen. How it says sharing your screen.
And
Oh yeah. I can see something, but I'm not quite sure. Okay, we've got it. We've got your screen. You're now presenting what looks like a PowerPoint.
There you go.
Yeah, fab. This is really clever, isn't it?
Well, it's a lot clever than you or me.
Anyway, now we're not seeing it, by the way, but we are. So if you can control it. What we're seeing now is you should be able to see a couple of people sitting on chairs and a fellow with white trousers and a blue shirt wandering around holding a cup of coffee nonchalantly.
Right. That would be my nonchalant friend. And that's the PowerPoint there.
So yeah, your nonchalant friend gave you the bird, and but we're looking good. I think this is working well.
Okay, so I can go off screen share for now.
Yeah.
I don't know how to get off screen share. Actually.
Well, I mean, we can hear you fine. And so if you work out how to get off screen share, then we see you now. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we can start with that and go back to screen sharing.
Okay. Now we're just going to get everybody in the room. So if you can give us a couple of minutes,
Sure.
well, a minute, I think. Charlotte, I think we're ready to roll.
Ian, could you, while we're waiting for everybody to come in the room, could you stand up again? That's it. Just stand in front of your camera.
Hang on. I'm cutting a bit of light out here.
Now, everybody in this, for us to hear him, we're going to have to speak into the microphone, just so you know, right? So just please do that if you wish to talk to him. Sorry, I got that the right way around. It's been a long old day of technical challenge.
If Rick has been your technical advisor, I'd say it would be a very long day.
No, it's kind of holding it together, but it is being quite difficult. And so, should we going to go for it? Do you want to start?
I think.
Are we waiting for anybody?
I think that Anki would just have to go round.
Okay, okay.
So give him 1 second.
So,
I just waited for a couple of people to show up.
Yeah.
Okay? You hear?
you have to speak into this. In fact, you're in control of the events now.
Oh, Christ. We're doomed. We're just waiting for a couple of people to come in the room, okay? Can you hear?
Are you talking to me?
I'm talking to you.
I'm in the room, so I'm not waiting for anything except for coffee.
Ian, while you're waiting for us, could you stand up for a minute in front of your computer?
I'm not sure that's a good idea.
It would be a good idea for us because we're in a post-lunch lull. And
Well, then you go. There you go.
there you go. Yeah, there.
Put your underwear on.
Yeah.
Great.
You know, he used to be a TV journalist, so he, dressed above the waist, and
Yeah, this is kind of like the naked news.
yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that is Salmon Nation. Thank you, Ian. Goodbye.
I think we're ready to roll.
Okay.
Do you want to introduce, brief introduction, and then Ian's on his own?
Yeah. Okay. Okay, friends at Potentino, you are looking at my friend Ian Gill, who is in Vancouver right now. Just say this about Ian. A great social change leader, environmentalist, journalist, and writer in British Columbia. And though it pains me to say it, a man I'm very proud to call my friend. Over to you.
Over to me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You're all looking off to the side, so I presume that whatever screen you're looking at is that way, not this way, but I'll assume that you're not just all looking off to the side in sort of disgust or it's a bit of an odd setup that I'm talking into your left ears, but that's fine. So greetings, everybody. I'm insanely jealous of the fact that some of you, maybe all of you, are in Potentino. I was there at New Year's and was a beneficiary of Charlotte Company's spectacular hospitality, but not only that, the spectacular thinking that has gone into the work that Charlotte and her colleagues are doing in Potentino and beyond. So I'm jealous that you're there and I'm not. And I'm also relieved that I'm starting my day with coffee, not red wine. Or you should be relieved of that anyway. And so what I wanted to just walk through, I mean, when Charlotte and I were in Potentino with my partner Zoe and others, we talked a lot about localization of economies and food and regenerative economics. And I've been working for a while with some old colleagues from an organization I was involved with for over 20 years called Ecotrust out here on the west coast of North America. And Ecotrust has been in some ways, some would say, a very successful organization. There was an Ecotrust and still is in the US, in Canada and in Australia, all of which I led in some form or another over the years. And combined, we have probably $150 million or so in assets. We have program work happening all up and down the left coast of North America. We have a forestry fund that we invest in regenerative forestry. We do local fisheries work. We work a lot with indigenous tribes. And most people look on Ecotrust and say, what a well-run, spectacular, effective organization it is. And all of the above is true. And frankly, the amount of actual impact we've been able to have in this region is, to be honest, negligible by comparison to the larger forces that we're confronting in the dominant economy. So we decided to hive off a few of us and work on this project called Salmon Nation. And I'll just describe that to you by running a PowerPoint, if you don't mind. I'm not a fan of PowerPoint, but I've kept the text short and the images long. And the beauty of PowerPoint in this instance is that you get to not see me for a while. So let me just bring up my PowerPoint on my screen, if I can go back to the screen share, and I'll walk you through what we have in mind. Can everyone see that?
No, we can't see it yet.
Okay. Let me go back here for a second. Let me see that.
No, now we see ourselves. But there we got it. Okay.
Okay. So now I've just got to figure out how to run the slideshow and we'll be good. Be 1 second here.
Yeah, that's it.
Slideshow. Play from the start. There we go. Does that show up?
Yeah.
Great. So our concept of Salmon Nation is a nature state as opposed to a nation state. And we live here. So this is the northwest of North America. The tradition in this region of thinking of itself as somewhat different and somewhat disconnected from the rest of North America. There's a long tradition of thinking of this region in different terms. Some people have called it Cascadia. Ernest Callenbach, a very well-known bioregionalist in Berkeley, once wrote a book called Ecotopia. It's known in some parts of the world and in North America as the Pacific Northwest. People call it the left coast, in part because this is where all the hippies came to sort of drop out and toke up. And it's actually a hybrid, or it's an area that embraces both the US and Canada. As you can see from this watershed map, it's Northern California, just sort of where the redwoods grow and where the salmon first were migrating in the south of San Francisco there. All of the sort of Oregon coast, Washington coast, British Columbia, and then the big area to the north is Southeast Alaska. We call it Salmon Nation. So just to go back, it's Cascadia, Ecotopia, the Pacific Northwest, the left coast. We've chosen to call it Salmon Nation because that area that you're looking at now is the birthplace of the Pacific salmon. The salmon's range, of course, is that it goes right across the ocean to the far east of Russia and as far as Japan. We're talking about the rivers and watersheds where the large Pacific salmon, wild salmon, are born, which happens to coincide with where the dominant coastal temperate rainforests of North America are. So we think this region is shaped by nature, by the range of salmon from Northern California to Southeast Alaska, and defined by culture, 14,000 years plus of indigenous settlement in these regions, and the last 200 years settlement of colonizers. In this region, there's about 33 million people. There's about a $1.5 trillion economy. The region is highly networked. I mean, it includes Silicon Valley. So capital centers such as San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, where I am, and I'd include probably Anchorage in that up in Alaska. So this region is incredibly highly networked in the urban centers. It's incredibly poorly networked in rural and what we call edge communities. And those communities are the sources of our food and our forest products, our fisheries, energy, and frankly, they're at the front line and provide the essential services for climate adaptation. So our basic proposition with Salmon Nation is to rename the system, rename where we live, to change the narrative of what occurs here or to privilege alternative narratives of what could occur here, with a real emphasis on what's working in terms of regenerative agriculture, fisheries, energy, but also public services, and accelerate that through an accelerator that we're building that will have, among other things, capital, and then to invite people aboard what we call the magic canoe. And frankly, Rick is a better expositor of the idea of the magic canoe than me, but we'll come back to that in a minute. But those are the four essential things that we're trying to do. So at the core of this is what we call a raven network. And one of the collective nouns for ravens is the storytelling of ravens. And we kind of borrowed the idea that we want to find people, and sorry, to just go back to this map here, all of those data points on that map there are what we're calling ravens. These are people we've already identified who are doing extraordinarily innovative and replicable work in edge communities. And so we're gathering this raven network, a storytelling of ravens, to share stories of what works in regenerative agriculture, what has come to be known as stewardship tourism, community fisheries, place-based education, smart energy, local healthcare delivery, community forestry, access to justice. And I think the important thing to point out here is that we don't think of our work just as working on environmental issues and food security, for instance, and things like that. We see that just as important as things like ag and fisheries and energy delivery and better forestry are things like the urgent public services, which are poorly provided as well in these edge communities because of a lack of capital. And the feature of this network we're setting up, so it's essentially like a social network, and it will be digitally powered, is that the network will be owned by ravens. So unlike Google and Facebook and other notorious networks, this will be owned by the ravens themselves and controlled by them. This is a sort of depiction of the raven network. At its core is this concept of full circle capital. This is capital that is sourced in the bioregion and spent in the bioregion. And Rick has pushed us to think about what the dimensions of our participation in this economy could look like. And we think it's reasonable to think that of that $1.5 trillion economy, we're not going to shut down the highways and turn the plug off of every pipeline. But we think a third of that economy could be in regenerative agricultures and fisheries and the energy and place-based service delivery. And if you look at the graphic on the right there, you'll see at the center of this is this raven network, and the stories, products, services, and exchanges, and radical experimentation, practical experimentation in what works. And we see capital flowing through that network and creating regional resilience, the benefit of ecosystems and economies and community health. So I've got a couple of examples here of what we think by radical practical experimentation. One is the Quay Lodge. These are young Indigenous children, place-based education program, which is probably one of the most hopeful education programs I've seen anywhere, and it's delivered by Indigenous people themselves to themselves. It is outside the conventional school system, and it is absolutely a brilliant breakthrough change to the education opportunities and the prospects of young Indigenous people who are some of the most victimised in our society. You'll see the centre photo there is a flour mill. There used to be 24,000 flour mills in America. There's now fewer than 200. So we're actually in the process of building a beautiful flour mill that's returning 3 times as much income to farmers. It's privileging varieties of wheat rather than just white flour. And we're already working on a second flour mill. So we're actually working at the local watershed scale to actually employ people creating their own food. And then finally, there's a hotel in Eastern Oregon, which has been funded by Kickstarter, and the local community there now has one of the most popular hotels in rural Oregon, which they've done through a Kickstarter capital raise. The Magic Canoe, this is a non-profit arm. Not everybody is a raven. Not everybody is a brave entrepreneur at the edge of chaos, if you will, in their community. But there are many people we've come across who want to participate in a grassroots movement to celebrate where they live and to promote and participate in change. So this notion of this metaphor of the magic canoe that will grow to take as many people as who want to work on these regenerative activities, whether they're running a flour mill or consuming the flour. That's a vehicle, a non-profit vehicle that we are launching, which also will provide access to the Raven network. And what's probably most interesting in some ways is the structure of what we're launching here. So ordinarily, we would launch a non-profit organization in North America, what's called a 501c3 in the US, and that's a charitable organization. But in doing that, we would be repeating what we did with Ecotrust, which is to basically set up a charity. You have a board of directors, you have all the inhibitions that come from a charity, but also you're basically using a trickle of capital to fight a very large fire. So our structure begins with an apex organization. That's the one on the left on the chart there, the Salmon Nation Trust, which is, there's a new entity in North America now called a Public Benefit LLC, Limited Liability Company. And so the Public Benefit LLC is a little like a non-profit organization in as much as that it adheres to a mission lock, if there's a mission lock. So you don't have to maximize returns to shareholders, which is what you would do in a normal company. Your responsibility is actually to the public benefit of the company rather than to shareholders. Trusted elders have been appointed to oversee the governance of this whole sort of 4-part hybrid structure and to ensure fealty to the purpose of the network, to the Confluence, which is the accelerator we're building, and which would also hold most of the capital, and to the Magic Canoe, which is the for the non-profit organization. So in summary, we think that Salmon Nation is a kind of a post-capitalism response to what doesn't work. We anticipate what I call a nature state wealth fund, or maybe more than one, as opposed to a sovereign wealth fund. Investors in that will be able to go beyond philanthropy because, in my view, philanthropy is parasitic and inefficient and frankly immoral. And we're going to provide a vehicle that allows people to put money into things that work locally for local benefit. And ideally, we will go well beyond pilot projects and actually begin to precipitate change at the scale that the times demand. That's my potted presentation. And theoretically, you're back looking at me. Is that true?
We're looking at ourselves, which is more attractive.
You're looking at yourselves. Okay, so if I turn off the screen share now, what I can do here's my, you'll end up looking at me. Let me get out of this, actually. There we go. There we go. Now you should be looking at me.
We see you.
You see me? And then we've sort of put this together. We have this thesis, which we put into this small book, which just came off the press this week, which does a better job than I just did of explaining what we're doing. But it's the sort of guts and feathers of what we're on about.
Great.
Thanks, Ian. That was great. And I think we can see if there's some questions. Yes, hang on one second. You're going to see, or you're going to hear a voice that you might recognize, Ian.
Hello, Ian. This is your old friend Nelson. Do you remember me?
Hello, how are you?
How are you doing?
Very good, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, so thank you so much for your presentation on the Salmon Nation. My question is on the issue of philanthropy, because today many organizations are involved in do-goodism and trying to do things in the name of philanthropy, but I just noted that you called it almost immoral. So I just wanted to understand your mindset on that particular point of view.
Right. Well, it's a fair question. I don't think that people who are running non-profit organizations and doing the good works that many people are trying to do. I think Paul Hawken, the author in his book Blessed Unrest, said there are something like 2 million non-profit or charitable organizations or civil society organizations around the world working on all manner of things, and I don't disdain those efforts at all. What I think is immoral is that the structure of philanthropy, certainly in North America, I know it works somewhat differently in Australia, and where I have some experience, and I think in the UK. But the very notion that you would generate capital in the way that businesses do, provide a tax benefit to people to take a very small proportion of their profit, put them into a foundation, and then enable and then staff the foundations to then give away that money at the kind of behest and to the sort of taste and choice of the generators of that capital, I think is actually pretty offensive. And it's been proven to lock so many organizations into project-based work, which is often proof of concept work. And there are so many proofs of concept that have been proven but never scale. So, for example, Ecotrust in Portland, Oregon, has more than $100 million in a forest fund, which is invested in regenerative forestry. This is thinning trees as opposed to clear felling all of them. taking cattle out of streams, so to regenerate the purity of the water for public consumption and for salmon productivity. Lower rates of harvest, still profitable. So they're actually employing people. They're cutting trees down. They're not sort of being environmentalists and say don't cut anything down. That's and storing carbon. So in terms of a response to climate change, it's actually a system that works. And $100 million to some people sounds like a lot of money, but it's really not. We need that model of forestry to be the dominant forest model in this region, to protect ourselves against climate change, to store carbon, and to create sustainable local economies. It is not. It is that $100 million, which has taken us years and years and years to raise through philanthropy and through green investing, is an absolute pinprick in the forest system management in this region. It's statistically, frankly, irrelevant. So we've demonstrated that it works. We've demonstrated there are actual returns on capital. There are more people employed. The streams are healthier. The communities are healthier. And just 2 days ago, when I was just in Oregon the last 2 days, the news came on that a small community, its mill just closed down because they've cut all the trees. They've finished cutting all the trees in that region. They can't find any more trees. The mill is shut down. 600 people are out of work, and the community doesn't have any other public income-generating assets except for a golf course. Well, there's not even going to be anybody there to play golf. So this kind of boom and bust economics is killing communities. So I think that if we were able to come up with a structure, and this is the most, I think, revolutionary thing about what we're trying to do with this public benefit company, if we can come up with a structure where the big, I mean, we're not going to stop the masters of the universe, the big capitalists who are accruing capital. They're doing what they do. They're not going to give that up easily. But if we could provide a vehicle where they could invest in and get returns in the community where they make their wealth, we think we've got a chance at turning philanthropy on its head and actually, ideally, making philanthropy go away. Sounds a little audacious, I know, but I think that philanthropy is an admission of failure in the capital system that we've constructed for ourselves. And now I've lost you all.
What a speech, though, darling.
What's that?
What a speech.
I couldn't get what you said.
How interesting! Somebody's completely the one person. Sorry,
I lost you all there for a minute there. So I stopped talking, and then my screen went dead for a minute. So I'm sure that was Google or something.
Yeah.
So,
No, we were also gobsmacked by what you said. That we were. Are there other? Anybody have a question? If not, I have one. Okay. See how to put this succinctly. I think what the heart of what you're saying is that there has been an extractive economy, and it's actually interesting, especially for Europeans to understand this. The west coast of North America, with this incredible bounty of lumber and fish and some minerals, of course, was colonized, and incredible wealth was created by extracting the resources from that place and really paying very little attention to the people who occupied that place. And of course, we have the legacy of those kind of industries and the legacy of their effect. Is what you're saying that by creating, fostering, in some ways capitalizing where you can, connecting local players whose practices are not extractive, but rather than leaving them as autonomous actors, creating a network that you think that you can actually generate or carve out up to a third of that $1.5 trillion economy, or generate something that could eventually become a 1/3 segment of that economy?
That's what we're aiming to do, and actually we're doing some work now to try and actually sort of size the amount of the economy that is frankly already would qualify as being part of this regenerative economy. And there's actually a surprising amount of work already going on of a surprisingly high value,
right,
that actually does follow a lot of the practices that we're talking about. So we've been out in the field, and well, a couple of things. One of the things is about presupposition. There are people out there doing extraordinary work who are kind of not well acknowledged by society at large, and certainly by capital markets. And we're finding that that's absolutely the case. Everywhere we go, we're finding people who, because of their geographic isolation or their lack of proximity to other practitioners, or their proximity to capital, are struggling to do the right thing, if you will. And there's a value judgment about the right thing. So they're out there, and we're trying to figure out what they already add up to. The other thing we're hearing from them is they want to be part of something larger.
right.
And they can't identify with a system that, frankly, at the moment ignores them.
Right. Okay. So there's a second part to my question, because basically you're trying to be an economy disruptor, but
Right.
Before you were running Ecotrust, you continue to be also a kind of calling bullshit, muckraking journalist, attacking power, both corporate and political power, that was exploitative and extractive. And do you think that there's still a need to attack and tear down the dominant economic power structures and the political structures that enable them? Or are you going to put all of your effort into the fostering and creating and networking of the disruptive economic players?
I think mostly the latter. I have to say that my reflexive impulse is always to, call bullshit, if you will, on the bad guys. But I do think that mostly what we're going to focus on is changing the narrative by celebrating and privileging positive deviance, if you will, as opposed to just excoriating the deviance. So I think it's a bit, there's this whole concept, we've talked a lot about this, Rick, of what's called solutions journalism. People are tired of hearing what doesn't work. Tell us what we can do. Tell us how we can participate. I'm a big believer in that, but part of solutions journalism is that you need to tell stories of what doesn't work, why it isn't working, in order to fill the jug with what does work. So I don't think it's a complete either or, and it pains me a little to be as celebratory as I'm being with some of my writings now, but I do think it's what the world needs.
Fantastic. Are there any other questions? Charlotte, you want to try? Yeah, hang on.
Thank you.
So, Ian, thank you very much for that. I'd actually like to understand a little bit more about this concept of a nature state, and exactly what that really means, this idea that you create boundaries with with the environment rather than political administration.
Right. And so, and I didn't do a very good job in my PowerPoint of explaining that, because, I'm sorry. Are you hearing me okay?
Yeah, we are.
What a
Hello.
crack.
Hello, can you hear us?
I can. There's just a lot of crackling on my end. I'll just talk. Tell me if it's not working for you. So part of that is that we see a lot of the work that we really admire happening at what we would call the watershed scale. So the watershed where we're building this flour mill, for instance, is in one of the poorest rural communities in Western North America, the Skagit Valley. But within that watershed, it has very high opioid addiction rates and everything else because there's a lot of people who are out of work because the logging is closed down and everything else. What we're seeing working at that scale, however, is both an identity to place that people actually really care about where they live, they care about the watershed, they can actually understand environmental issues at a local scale that they often cannot quite comprehend at a national or global scale. So there's both the proximity of place and there's also kind of the scale of working in an area where this flour mill, for instance, is going to produce, it produces in a year the amount of flour that ADM produces in a day. So, which is the big, a flour miller, industrial flour miller. So it's not set up to replace ADM. It's set up to provide at the local scale enough flour to feed people in that region. And they actually can see a product of their own watershed on their kitchen table. And it produces savings in terms of transportation, all the things that you do when you can work at that scale begin to accrue in a way that people can actually acknowledge that in the place that they live. So also, it is a way we can actually approach thinking about restoration of the environment in a way that doesn't actually come up like top-down, big national non-government organization environmentalism. People want to work in their watershed and can work in their watershed on restoration projects and actually see the benefit of them. Whereas a top-down nature conservancy coming in or World Wildlife Fund coming in is kind of inimical to how people operate in their own communities, and they're quite offended often by these organizations. So one thing we've learned at Ecotrust, some see Ecotrust as a big NGO, but it's actually not really. The one thing we've learned is that place-based work defined, and we define it by watersheds as the places, is the scale at which actual change can happen on the ground. There's huge things that get ignored in doing that, of course, which is what the larger markets are doing, the transportation networks, the energy systems, all that sort of stuff. So we are doing sort of, we're trying in the end to do what we've always done, which was to attract and localize capital and attach it to work that's happening at the local scale. And the watershed unit is the way that we think is best to organize around that. And the idea of a nature state, frankly, is that, I mean, to be honest, living in Vancouver, I don't have any expectation, or on the West Coast, I don't have any expectation that Ottawa is going to do much good for me. As a citizen of this area, the nation of Canada provides some benefits, but frankly, the solutions to what are happening in my region of the world are going to be crafted here. They're not going to be crafted in Ottawa. And if anybody has any expectation that Washington, D.C. is going to pass the sorts of policies, legislate the sorts of things that are going to benefit this region, especially when it comes to climate adaptation, you just have to look at who's running Washington, D.C. for any thoughts on that. So these defining and ignoring the US-Canada border and just basically saying we share geographic similarities throughout this whole region, big trees, big fish. We share a culture going back thousands of years, whose language and whose nature was built around the availability of food and these incredible resources. We believe that organizing around a nature state is also a way of giving people something they can belong to, which doesn't atomize or alienate them along sort of political lines. And so, in theory, could be as attractive to a gun-toting Republican as to a latte-sucking Democrat. Put things in right. So that's why we think organizing around a nature state is more interesting than hanging on to the notion of a nation state.
Ian, I've got one last question. Can you hear?
Yeah.
I got the microphone the right way. Yeah. I just want to make sure I'm holding the microphone the right way. About 8 years ago, 6 years, I can't remember exactly when it was, we organized in Portland something that we called resilience regions. This is with Ecotrust, where we brought representatives from bioregions around the world to see if we could begin to create this notion of regional organizing, economic, narrative, political organizing. So, what you're doing at the Salmon Nation scale, then we were trying to also make those connections because they're, in Newfoundland, we've got this in Eastern Canada and the Eastern Seaboard. We have the same thing with cod. We have the, the food economies here and so on. And it actually feels, there's a long way to go in this, but it does feel, and what you're trying to do here, Charlotte, that connecting these dots around the world where there are people and in places and people and places that are starting to see that regaining control from displaced power may be our best last hope for trying to make a sustainable world. I think we're running out of time. So on behalf of all of us here who are going to go out in the loggia and drink a lot of wine, and we thank you, stuck in Vancouver. And tell Zoe I'm here, okay, because she was trying to get in touch.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, darling.
She's right there.
Okay. Bye. Thank you so much, Ian.
Well, thank you for your greatest attention and good luck. And we'll see you soon, I hope.
Okay.
Bye, Nelson and Maggie. Bye, Charlotte.
Bye, ciao.
Ciao. Thank you, Ian. Thank you.
And actually, thank you for